School of Management. His research focuses on both methodology and practice of optimization, specifically in mathematical programming and dynamic programming for scheduling, healthcare, and supply chain problems. He has completed his PhD from Carnegie Mellon University in Operation Research in 2014. And his awards include the Conference Harvey Greenberg Research Award in 2024, the Research Excellence Award at the University of Toronto Scarborough, the Informed Computing Society Best Paper Award, and the Joel L. Thompson Doctor Dissertation Award at Carnegie Mellon University. André currently serves as an associate editor from the network optimization area of Informs Journal on Computing, and in several senior roles in conferences such as AAAI, NeurIPS, CP, and CPAIR. Thank you, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for receiving me. First of all, it's a big pleasure. I always cherish this opportunity of going to other departments. It's my second time in this building through all the time I've been here, more than 10 years. I never seen this. Reminds me of my undergrad that they also have a civil engineering like X and had something similar. So I really appreciate, because I think you're working such different areas, and I hope that you can find connections that you can either leverage in your own research, some ideas, and we don't collaborate a lot, and I think it's a missed opportunity, right? Because I'm sure you're working lots of different transportation problems that could bring some kind of an operations perspective, and that would be wonderful just to convey. So I'm going to present some slides. Maybe I won't be able to finish all of them. It doesn't matter. I just want to present the key ideas so that you can bring home and think about it and see if there's something that you can learn in future research. When I was a PhD student, I think some of the most fruitful things for me was to see talks that were completely out of my area, and then give me ideas. I remember a paper that I got just because of that. So it's very nice just to diversify a little bit your minds. Okay. Now, before I begin, first question: who here knows linear programming? Who here has ever used Gurobi and put a solver thing in Gurobi, or know what Gurobi is? Okay, that's interesting. So you learned from a class, right, linear integer programming, but not many of you have applied. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some optimization techniques, okay, I'm going to try to explain some of the background. If it is too basic, let me know and then I jump. If it is too complicated, then I'll try to push back. So pull back. I know that I have just added some more basic material here just to give you some framework, but those ideas are not simple at all. Even today, I'm still struggling to, it takes a long time for you to really understand intricacies and how optimization methodology works. So it's always a very, you're always learning something new. That's why this is interesting. Okay, so this talk in Transportation Meets Healthcare is a joint work with a professor from New York University. It's in dynamic assignment around home care. So it was with a company that we worked. We got a paper. I'm going to give you a reference later, but we got so much learnings from this that we are still applying different projects. So I thought it was an interesting transportation talk about. All right, so first I just need to make this work. In the worst case, I can just go here. Great. So we're going to talk about a dynamic routing problem. So what is a routing problem? You have to create a route. Okay, so here we're going to focus more on the prescriptive part of routing. So we're going to essentially have some type of map, and I want to build some kind of path from point A to point B. All right, so this is routing, the basic principles of routing, and we are looking to prescriptive data support systems. In other words, people will come with the points that they want to go, with the data, and then we're going to create an optimization methodology that's going to give a solution. So the solution can be a path. So this is the type of problems that we're going to be working on. What does it mean to be dynamic? Dynamic because every day you're going to have to solve the same problem. The issue is that the decisions that you make in a day is going to have a long impact throughout different periods, even maybe a year. And you're going to understand why in a second. So then the routes that you make today, they're going to also impact the future, so you have to be very careful how you design those routes. Make sense? All right, so it's going to be in the home healthcare applications. Have you ever used home care in Canada? Hopefully not. But it's a very, very important service. I'm going to tell you in a second. And they lead to challenge dynamic programming models. Who here has heard of dynamic programming before? A little bit? Right, so we're going to explain. It's a way to formulate this type of problems. So when I say routing, routing is going to be embedded in this idea of feasibility and reward structure. So what does it mean? Feasibility is solutions that are feasible, that can be applied. So many times, in this application, we're going to say, hey, we're going to have nurses or health practitioners that are going to have to visit different locations. And this has to be feasible, this has to be applicable. For example, you cannot ask a person to travel 10 or let's say 18 hours a day to spend in transit, because otherwise they're gonna violate shift law, labor laws, and they're gonna be very tired and the quality of service is gonna go down. So it's embedded in the feasibility, how feasible it is, and also how we evaluate the quality of a solution. Alright, so here what we're gonna be solving is a traveling salesperson problem. Have you ever heard of the TSP? Everybody? Does anybody has not heard? All right. Has anybody, you never heard of TSP?
No, I didn't.
I did, okay. It's one of the most beautiful, important problems. I'm going to describe a little bit what happens, but we're solving lots of TSPs. What is the key question? The key question is how the transportation aspect, how this routing, the fact that we have to visit different locations, impact quality of service in home care under uncertainty. So this is where the dynamic aspect comes. What is uncertainty? You don't know which patients will come in the future. So you have randomness. That's when data comes in, right? You don't know what the future holds, so that somehow you have to leverage data to make better decisions about the future. But this is just a context. So we're going to be doing dynamic routing problems, okay, that has a routing structure in the sense that we're going to be solving TSPs. And then the challenge is how should you design the routing considering that you have uncertainty in the future? That's the key idea of this application.
Sorry to interrupt you. When you say uncertainty, is only related to health, or is also related to the, I don't know, traffic jam? Or
So, great point. The uncertainty is going to be relative to the patient type.
okay.
So we're going to receive, what is the demand? The demand is going to be uncertain. The times actually are not going to be so uncertain in the particular applications because we just care about estimates and general estimates. Okay? Great question. I'm going to make sure this is precise. Good? All right. So home care. If you've never heard of home care, is essentially personalized healthcare. So instead of people going to the hospital, they send nurses, personal support workers to go to the patient's home to provide service. That's home care. So you have different types of home care. Usually is associated with more senior people, right? They have to stay home. It's very hard, very expensive for them to go to the hospital. So then you send healthcare personnel to their own homes. And usually they do simple things, for example, injections. They just, if a person has some kind of, it needs some kind of simple treatment, for example, like in the picture, they go there, they do that simple treatment, but everything in the person's home. Again, it's usually associated with elderly people, but that's not always the case. So many young people still also use home health care. I have friends that use it. I fractured a bone, so they just come to their places just to make sure that they check everything's okay and then they go home. So it is one of the biggest industries in Canada. It's one of the ones that really grow very fast, just because it's much, much cheaper to send someone to the person's home than send them to the hospital. Right? I hope that you never had the chance to go here to the ER in Toronto. You spend in Michael Garrett. It's a very good service, but you spend a long time, and for the hospital too, it's very expensive and so on. Yes.
Why is it cheaper? Shouldn't there be scale effects from having everyone come to the same location so that you don't have to duplicate some costs? It just seems a way.
Great question. Yeah. So you're saying, do you have economies of scale by having lots of people? That's the interesting part. You do just at some points, right? But the number of people coming is still very large in hospitals. Congestions. You have, when you come, you have a triage for a nurse, then you're going to see the physician, you have to do MRI machine, you're taking a seat, and then if you take the cost of the physician, the nurse, all the processes is much larger than a person going to the hospital, a person going to the person's place and doing the procedure. I can give you numbers. is around a few $1,000 in the hospital. So if you go to the hospital, $1,000 that the healthcare system has to pay, on the order of thousands of dollars. But for a nurse, it's around a few $100. So it's much cheaper. Okay. There's also lower risk of infection, right? There are also trade-offs, right? So you cannot do an MRI at the person's place and so on. But for quick things, it's much cheaper. Great question. Any other questions? What type of workers do you have? You have nurses. So nurses perform more complicated service like this, injections, and you have personal support workers. Personal support workers are the majority of them, and what they do is, they clean the house, or they also do some very simple. I'm going to show you some examples later, but they also just do some simple. If a person has some kind of skin problem, just clean it. So still very simple work, but majority are personal support workers. But everything that needs a little more, healthcare knowledge than a nurse has to do. Okay. Now I'm just going to call them healthcare practitioners, HPs. So it's not a printer; it is a healthcare practitioner. All right. So that we don't discriminate in the sense that we don't need to. They have different cost structures, but just to make sure we use a common language for both of them. And of course, every HP has a different shift time and work structure. So usually they work by contracts. So you have a 6-hour contract for personal support workers. Sometimes nurses, they have 10 to 12 hours. So they have very different contracts. Overtime costs also are very different, right? So if a nurse works overtime, it's way more expensive than a PSW because they are providing very sophisticated care in some ways. Good? Now, again, it's the fastest growing industry in the US, and you can see why, right? People, more and more seniors, one of the biggest issues of the world nowadays is that, we have this large number of more elderly population, and they require more care, and then home care is a way for you to cope with the costs. So in North America, there are 12 million patients a day. All right. Here in Canada is 1 to 2 million patients. It's a huge number. Interesting fact, if you count how much they travel, is around twice the distance of UPS delivery trucks. That is huge. So you think about the delivery trucks taking your Amazon, they are traveling way more already than delivery trucks. So it's a really growing industry. It's going to continue growing for the next 10, 15 years or even more. Good? All right. So, yeah, any questions?
Yeah. So do they travel more because it's less optimized, or also because it's just way bigger distance because it's remote or something like that?
Both of them.
Okay.
It's not very optimized many times. It's something that we actually tackle, but also they can go longer distance, which is a consequence of the other. Also, you have way more. It's a if you think of a truck, if you take a truck, the truck goes and delivers individual products, but it's the same truck, right? And they deliver for. They do 20, 25 packages a day. A person cannot see more than 6, 10 people a day, right? HP, because otherwise they're going to get tired, and they have to just run and check it. People appreciate when they go, they spend some time, they have some coffee, and then they go. So they spend more time with each person, so they have more people traveling. Make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Are these HPs hired by like a hospital or some central agents?
Great question. I'm going to answer in the next slides. Okay? Any more questions?
Just a basic question. Are we talking about 200 kilometers a day or less than this?
Oh.
When you say twice the distance, I don't know the distance of a UP truck. I know that could be a lot, but I don't have a clue.
Okay, so this is in sum, right? In sum.
Oh, okay.
In sum. But if individual person, no, they cannot travel this much a day. Yeah. No, it's I'll try to get you some numbers. Yeah. But good question. This is the aggregates.
Okay, I see.
You have way more people with healthcare than delivery. Great questions. Please keep asking. Any others? Awesome. So, how does it work in Canada, to answer also our friend's question? So in Canada, you're going to have agencies healthcare agencies that they are completely independent. So if you want to open an agency as it's a company, yourself you can open a home care agency, right? And you can hire your own employees. Okay, so every agency has their own employees, and they can do whatever they want with I mean, of course, the labor laws, but they are more independent. So the Canadian system in the US is very similar. It's very similar too, but you don't need a referral. Here we need a referral from your family doctor. But how does it work in Canada? So you have an issue, you go to your family doctor, and the family doctor says, well, don't go to the hospital, you're going to be assigned some home care. So you need to receive, you have the flu, you need to receive these injections for 3 days. So they give you a referral to a health care. Then what you do is that you're going to go to a system, and the system you're going to request home care. It's a government system. What the government's going to do is that they have a list of the home care agencies in Ontario, in Toronto, and you're going to ask each one of them, do you accept these patients? You do a round robin. They ask, agency, do you accept this patient? Have you the capabilities to accept this patient? If they say yes, so then you are allocated to them and they have to provide you home care. If the agency says no, they're going to have to go to the next agency, and they ask the same question. And they keep doing this in a way that satisfies some kind of fairness. Okay, you look puzzled?
Yeah, that seems like a kind of inefficient way of...
Oh yeah, that's a whole other story. Yes, you can ask. It's inefficient because it's decentralized, right? So you don't know what's happening, and the agencies provide more information. That's a whole new research project. Very interested in that, but that's a whole different research project. Make sense? So then the patient receives the home visits for a particular duration, and the agency gets a reimbursement, all of this. So they get money from the government to provide home care. Good? Yes?
So I know that you said that the physician recommends the home care system.
Yeah, the family doctor.
The family doctor, right. But what would push the family doctor to recommend the home care versus the hospital? I know like there are some cases
Right.
that you require it.
Right. So,
Like you gave an example like the flu or like you need to take injections. Like,
Uh-huh.
why wouldn't they do it through them? Because I'm assuming the home care system might be more expensive if you're calculating the travel time and the equipment used.
right. So the family doctor only sees, so there is a push by the government. If you can't do home care, do home care,
Okay.
right? The physician only sees the type of treatments. So there's going to be a list of treatments and they say this is good for home care. You got hurt, you just need to do some cleaning, said just do home care. Because otherwise you're going to have to go to the hospital every day.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to do that. So it's a list of treatments. Okay, so they don't look at the routing that happens in the agencies. Any other questions? All right. Now, agencies are reimbursed per patient and per visit. Now you're going to see some sources of inefficiency too, right? But what happens is they say, I'm going to pay, if you go to the home care, I'm going to pay you $10 for every visit. That's the government telling the agency. But this is different than the cost that the agencies they have. So agencies, they have to pay their HPs. They're going to have their own costs, but they have to fund the healthcare practitioners by their shift length. Right? So if you work 6 hours, you're going to get some funds. But if you work 8 hours, you're going to get 6 plus 2 overtime. And they also pay a rate for travel time. The longer you travel, the more you spend in transit, they give you more money. So you see there's already some discrepancy, right? So the government doesn't see the actual routing, which is not, we should not blame because it's so complex. We're going to talk a little bit. But the incentive of the government is to try to minimize the visits, right? And the incentive of the agency is first to accept as many as they can, because that's how they get the funds. But if they accept too many people, then all their HP is just going to keep traveling all around and they're going to spend a lot of money. Make sense? Awesome. So, what is the problem from the agency's perspective? So here we are focusing on service. patient in a way that the costs are still under control. Make sense? All right, so this is the problem that these two questions that we have to solve here. So it's to understand, what is the structure of these questions, what is happening underlying here, and some methodologies that we can address this. All right, so this is closer to this whole area called dynamic scheduling with appointment rules. It's a whole area. There are billions of papers on this. So, for example, if you go to the dentist, right, you're going to have to make a schedule, right? And so, how should the dentist office organize, provide you, offer you some times so that it is efficient, so that they can accommodate more people and so on? Because what happens is that a lot of people cancel, right? And then you can think also in when you travel, there's some overbooking, so there's a whole study of how you do this dynamically. But the problem is that we have some difficult routing constraints. So let's specify what a routing constraints are, what do they mean, what do I mean by routing constraints. So what is the main challenge here? The main challenge is that every day, these HPs, they are traveling in tours. If we study a little bit of graph theory, it's called the Hamiltonian cycles, but or is equivalent to a TSP, traveling salesperson. TSP is essentially finding tours. So what happens? So this is an example of two tours combined. Okay? So you can think only on the tour on the right-hand side. So the patient, the HP, what happens is that they receive their assignment, and they receive some routing suggestions. Or you have to maybe go to patient A, B, C, then go to D. Due to different constraints, maybe they have to go in some appointments from 2 to 3 p.m. to a particular patient. They optimize to so on. So then what the HP does is that they take their Ferrari, they leave their home, and they go to each patient one at a time. And then they go back to their homes. So that's their day. So they leave their homes or a hospital, because sometimes they have to go to a hospital to get the list. They go to a person's place, they spend some time there providing service, we call this service time, or providing the care. Then they go and travel to the next one, and come back, just like a delivery someplace, right? Now, of course, if you think about all the HPs in a day, you can see you have this flower kind of, this petal type of shape, where each one of them is their own patients and coming back to the hospital. Okay? And you can assume that they never go to the hospital twice. They leave the hospital, go to everybody, and then come back. Right? With some break time to have meals and so on. They leave the hospital, travel to one patient at a time, and come back. So this is a tour. It's a very fundamental concept of optimization tours. Good? So what they are doing every day is that they are solving a traveling salesperson problem. That's what they are doing every day. With different constraints, and we're going to get there, but they're solving a TSP. The HPs or the agency are solving a TSP. Now, different agencies, they have different policies. Some of them, they are really strict. Hey, so go through these patients in this order. Do it. You have to do it. Others, they just give a recommendation and let the HPs decide. But HPs also is of their best interest to try to minimize this distance. So let's just talk about the TSP. So I know that the TSP everybody knows very well, but just for us to be on the same line, okay? The TSP is one of the most beautiful, important problems in optimization. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. It's one of the building blocks to many more complicated methodologies that exist. Okay? So what is the input? So in the most fundamental classical form, I'm going to give you a depot, a place of origin, and I'm going to give you nodes. Can be in a graph, can be points in the city, okay, nodes. And I'm going to give you a distance between each one of those nodes. So I'm going to give you this matrix. For example, the distance to go from A to B is going to be 2 units, 2 kilometers, 2 minutes, whatever. All right? So then the TSP asks for what is the minimum tour. That is, I leave and go back to the pool, visiting one location at a time exactly once, to minimize the total sum of the distances that I want to traverse. So, for example, if I go from the pole to B, I'm going to have a cost of 3. B to C, I'm going to have a cost of 5. And I keep doing this until I go back, I sum these distances, this is the travel time, or the travel distance associated with this tour, and when I minimize it. And that's the problem. Now you can think, oh, is this hard? Is this problem hard? Find the sequence. It is extremely hard. It is extremely hard. So, when you study computer science on operations optimization, there are difficult ways of defining what hard is, right? One of the most traditional is called NP-hard. Have you heard of this, NP-hard? It's a concept that says that if you solve one problem, you solve them all, right? That's the definition of NP-hard. That there is one problem, there are a few certain classes of problems that somehow they encompasses all the other problems that are also difficult. If you can solve one, you can solve all of them. But this concept, it's very theoretical, and you don't get a lot of insights. So there are lots of problems that are NP-hard, but that they're actually easy to solve in practice when you put in Gurobi, in Python, you call .optimize, it solves quickly. The TSP is a case where it's NP-hard, and it's very hard to solve. It's hard in all possible aspects. Okay? Hard in all possible aspects. So, but it's also one of the most important problems in routing optimization, because every time you're trying to find tours, right? Or you're trying to find sequences to solve for. It's easier than in Google Maps, right? Google Maps, you say, I want to go from point A to point B. That's what's a shortest path problem. That's easier. What makes it difficult is the fact that you have to visit everybody at least once, and exactly once. That's what makes the TSP difficult, okay? In contrast to like a shortest path problem. So there's so much theory. You cannot even imagine. Like when you study LP, I don't know when you study programming, did you ever do the plots, the two-dimensional graph, when you're doing sensitivity analysis? If you do that for the TSP in a larger dimension, all the problems of the universe are contained in one of the facets in the TSP. It's like insane. There's such beautiful, interesting, intriguing theory underlying these problems. And it was the basis for what we call mixed integer linear programs. So if you ever solved a map, that was the TSP was one of the fostering forces for the creation of mixed integer linear programming and integer programming. So it was first formed in this German handbook. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it, but studying history of optimization is also very interesting. And there are lots of applications beyond healthcare. For example, I spent some time in Google, and then when I was at Google, one of the problems they had is, how do I do a music list? So I want to play the songs, but I want to make sure that the songs are somewhat close to each other when I play, right? So I don't know, you're playing like some romantic song, and then goes to metal rock, and then goes to romantic song again. You want to make sure that first you play the romantic songs. So this is a TSP. They were solving a TSP problem. Spotify does that too. All right. So I don't want to go through much of notation, but there are dozens of TSP models. The most important then, just so that you can see, is this kind of linear programming problem, just so that you can see some equations. I'm going to focus more equations later. But this is how it looks, and you don't need to see, but just in case you have ever seen an LP, that's how it looks like. Looks simple, but it's really complicated. But what is the, just make sure, okay, wow. How do you solve the TSP? So it is already very challenging, but the good news is that even though we don't have a theoretical efficient method that always solve that can solve all problems in the world, when you look at the particular data, when you look at practical problems, you don't need the most efficient method. So theoretically, it doesn't work. We don't have an efficient algorithm, but in practice, it works super well. So if you think, okay, the simplest way is to enumerate. So how do you enumerate? If it's 1, 2, 3, then 3, 2, 1, you try all sequences. With 15, you already have 1 trillion sequences. With 25, it's more the number of atoms in the universe. So forget about enumeration, it's not going to work. But if you look at the literature, there are lots of good packages that solve this very efficiently up to 25,000 sequences. So we are okay for the TSP, we are okay. All right, but in our setting, we also have some complications. First, we don't want to always solve a TSP, we want to solve a vehicle routing problem. Because first you need to assign the patients to the different HPs, and then each HP you're going to optimize them separately, right? And finding the optimal location is it's a much more difficult problem than just finding one route. But that's okay. There are, the development of TSP also inherits the development of vehicle routing problems. So we still have very good strategies to solve these assignments and allocation. But remember, you also have some operational constraints here. It's not only finding a sequence, the sequence has to be feasible. What do I mean by feasible? You have to visit all the patients. You have to make sure that the HPs are not working more than 10 hours a day or 6 hours, depending on their allocation. And you have to make sure that the allocation is feasible in the sense that you have a skill, right? Nurses have some skills that the PSWs don't have. So if someone needs a more complicated treatment, you need to make sure that you're allocating to the right personnel. Good? Blah, blah, blah. Good news. There are a lot of works in this. Lots of works of how you solve this problem with these constraints and vehicle routing. Right, so how does this reflect in practice? The way how they do in practice is that they implement all those methods. We go to the agencies, they have a personnel that is focused on creating the routes and optimizing. And essentially, they put that into a software, and the software is going to output the solution to give to the HPs. Beautiful, right? So just to show you an example, this is a software called AIMS. It's for general routing. You can actually download, there's a student license that is for free, AIMMS. And then you can, even design your own routes, create a nice, beautiful dashboard for you to optimize different HPs. That's how they do. That's the software that they see. So then, why do I even talk to you if there's something that is solved, right? Well, the problem is much, much deeper. So the issue that happens is that they address a deterministic version of the problem. I give you the patients today, and you're going to do the routing for that same day. He's not considering that there will be new patients that arrive in the future, right? So the demand is uncertain, and the solutions that you get from these packages, they can actually be far from the optimal ones because they are not looking into the future. They're just looking into the current status of the universe. So why does that happen? Why do you need to look into uncertainty when you do this routing? So let me show you. Remember that I said about the demand, right? So each patient is random with 3 features. Not so much about the travel times, but the patient structure, just to answer one of your questions. So what is random about the patients? First, we don't know what type of skills they're going to need. Do they need one treatment? They need just someone to clean the house. We don't know the type of service that the patients will need. And that's going to change the assignment of the HPs. We don't know how many days they're going to need in service. We don't know how many days they're going to need in service. So we don't know that a patient that is going to come is going to require 1 day or 100 days, right? And unfortunately, what happens is some patients, they spend all the, it's a type of service where they just go to provide end-of-life support. So they can spend a year or they can spend 10 days, until they pass away. It's a very difficult type of decision to make. So the other complication here is that they must be served by the same HP throughout their treatment, or you should not deviate that too much. Why do you think that's the case? That you want to have something called continuity of care. When you assign a patient, the patient spends the rest of their life in the system with the same HP. Why is that important?
Learning.
Learning.
To learn the characteristics of this particular patient, and it's a waste of time to do that many times.
Learning.
And patients feel more comfortable once they have the same. Especially old people, they have a really small circle of relationship.
Right.
It's really important for them to have the same person, especially if they have disease like Alzheimer's or something like that, I guess.
It's perfect, yeah. Exactly. That's the main thing, that they feel connected. So as soon as if the patient complains, they change the HP right away. because they know that it's so important for the length of care to have the same HB. The other thing is that we don't know where they are coming from. So the patient will come from some point in the map that we don't know whether that point is going to be very far from the current patients that they are providing service for or not. So we don't know tomorrow where the new patient is going to come. So the decisions that you make today can be really impactful on the decisions that you're going to make tomorrow. Just because of these three reasons. So let me, this is just a decision, let me give you an example of why that happens. So the core idea, this is just one of the examples of many things that can go wrong. The core example of uncertainty is myopic. The fact that the decisions are myopic. I'm only looking at the today, and then the fact that I just only look at today, I'm losing all my knowledge about the future. So for example, suppose that day one, I'm in my home, or this is the agency's center headquarters, and a new patient comes. And I go there, and then I just look into the travel time to visit patients directly from the nurse. It's too large. It's too long. The reimbursement that I'm going to get is not enough. If the reimbursement that I'm going to get is not enough, then I'm going to reject the patients because it's going to be too expensive. I'm going to lose money, not worth it. Reject it. Okay? Now, suppose that in the future, so let's say this patient spends a long time in the system, right? In the future, I know that with high probability, by looking at my data, there will be a new patient very close to that one. In a way that when I do this route, it's now profitable because I'm going to get reimbursement from this too, and so the travel time is not going to be so impactful. Let's say they live in the same building. So now it's profitable. If I kept this patient in the system. Yeah?
I have a question. So it's more like, you have patients, like, as a constraint, you have patients that need to be taken care of like early in the morning, and so it's really hard to manage both of them, or do you take that into account? Or?
Yeah. They do. When you're designing the systems, sometimes you don't need to look into all the details. So because you just decide a strategic decision, and you may relax some of those constraints. But in the day-to-day, you definitely have to. Yes.
Yeah, but question. So in this picture, like you don't really lose much because the red person is still in the system. But are you saying that there's a risk that if you reject the red person in day one, like they may just like go away?
So
is that a risk?
yeah, you reject the patient goes away. So let's say you reject this patient. So then in day two, you don't have this patient here. So because this patient, let's say, live in the same building, you're going to reject this patient too. What's going to be your profit? 0. Here your profit is, I don't know, here is negative, -5. Here is 10. So on average you are 10, let's say dollars. This means that from 0 you went to 10. This is an arbitrarily better solution. Is an infinitely better solution. That's the ratios, right? So that's what happens. This is rejecting is a very bad solution because then the cost can be as large as you want. The savings. From 0 you go.
Yeah, sorry, but if you think that the red guy is going to stay in the system for a bit, like you can maybe reject them in day one. Like is that a good solution?
So, no, that's a bad solution. To reject this patient is a bad solution. But if you only look at this day and ignore the future, you're going to reject this patient. Right?
So like if you reject, they immediately go away?
They go away.
Okay.
Because they go to another agency.
Okay.
So this is the agency perspective. You reject, they go away forever. Yeah. Make sense now?
Yeah.
You cannot reject the next, or accept the next day.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, you can't.
I just have a question about the data availability. Is all the home care data available for all agencies, or every agency has to manage their own, I would say, model because they have limited data sources?
So they just compete.
Yeah,
So they have their own data and they don't share.
they don't share about.
No. they write a report to the government, but they don't have much, they limit the amount of information it provides.
I see.
Any more questions? Does it make sense? This is just one of the examples. You can also have the other way around. You accept, but then you think this patient is going to stay a long time, they're still going to stay a long time, but then they stay a day, so then you have the opposite effect. So this is just one of the examples of bad things that can happen. All right? You convinced, or still a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. No, you asked a lot of questions. We are out of time already. I'm so sorry, but that's great. So let me just give. Can you stay in like 5 minutes? Let me just give some of the Q&A. I'm happy to share the slides and talk more later. But I think that's the main point: is that having a certain interpretation is really, really important to consider, because now you have to make these decisions, this couple decisions throughout the time. So, can you formulate the system stochastically? You can. So you all learned one technique called linear programming, integer programming, right? That you learn in OR. How do you handle these dynamic systems? So these dynamic systems are really difficult, right? So one way how you can do it is formulating a Markov decision process. Have you ever heard of Markov decision process? So MDP is essentially, in the systems, you are solving these MIPs every day. But when you solve a MIP in a particular day, you also have to consider the MIP for the future. So I'm going to jump all the formulation, and just want to give you one type of approximation for you to see how it's formulated. Okay? So forget about this formulation. Just focus on the part below. This is what they have to solve in one day. Okay, so suppose I'm just solving the current day. Current day, what I have to do is I have to route. So if I tell you what is the assignment, you can think of xj as the assignment. So what I'm assigning to each person in a particular day. The service time is going to be a linear function, right? If you have 10 patients and each patient takes 20 minutes, it's going to be 200 minutes. So it's going to be a linear function. The travel time is going to solve this tool. So what you want to do is that you want to formulate a system that solves the current day, but somehow estimate the impact of the future. And you can do this in very fancy ways that I don't want to bother you, but I just want to solve one specific model. Look, I did all these beautiful slides, but that's it. So what we want to do is that we're going to change the way how they think about routing in the following sense. I still want to use all these beautiful approaches that they have for the TSP. All these beautiful approaches they have for the TSP and MIPS and back routing, all these technologies, right? But I cannot just give you a beautiful stochastic model that people don't know how to use. I still have to make sure that it's usable by these agencies. So what we do is that we're going to incorporate this loop forward or look ahead into the current models. So how do we do this? Something called one-step optimization. So essentially what I'm doing is that I'm making some decisions. These are accept decisions. How many patients I need to accept in a way that is less than equal to the patients that arrive today. Optimizing some constraints, but this is essentially the travel time. How much reward I'm getting, how much revenue I'm getting, and this is the cost of the travel time, the TSP. So this is if I were solving a single day. Now what we're going to do is that we're going to solve an estimate of the future. So what I'm saying is that it just suffices for you to get much better solutions, for you to change a little bit the object function to not only consider the distance that you traveled, but what is the impact of these decisions in the future. In the future. Just a simple perturbation of this object function. Okay? So I'm going to make the optimal decisions today, but I'm going to somehow perturb the objective to somehow incorporate some idea of the future. How do you do this? And that's the idea, is very, very simple and easy to implement. It's called the two-stage stochastic program, but let me just give a very simple idea. So what I'm going to do, this is the crazy part, and I promise that just 3 minutes I'm done, but this is the crazy part. I'm going to assume that in the future, I'm going to have a policy that randomly assigns patients to HPs. Today I'm going to make the optimal decisions with an estimate that in the future it's random. I'm going to give as input a probability of assigning, and then that's going to be, this probability is going to assign randomly, and I'm going to use that as estimate of the future. That's it. So, is this, would this be a good idea to assign randomly patients? The thing is, that's actually not that much of a bad idea. That's the interesting part, right? Because for multiple reasons, you can test, you can bias the probabilities in a way that is useful. That is not so far. Again, you're still optimizing over the current day. It's just that in the future, you're making some random decisions. You assume that you're making random decisions. And now, what I'm arguing is that in many cases, those random decisions are not that bad. Why? Why are not that bad? So, it's called something called random basis policy. If I give you random probabilities, how do you calculate? The summary of this is it's easy. It's just an expectation. If you know stochastic, it's very easy. You just sum. It's a summation. Super easy. The interesting things. Let me just jump. Before I tell you why that's a bad idea, I'm just going to say what is the impact of your solution methods. The impact of your solution method is you're going to change the TSP to a probabilistic TSP. If I give you a probability of visiting a patient in the future, essentially now you have a TSP where the vertices may not exist. There's a probability that they are there. If they exist, then we can call this probability by using these beautiful products. It's not hard. You just spend one afternoon, ask ChatGPT is going to give you the probability estimation very easy. But it's not a very difficult variant to do. It's much harder, but there are good algorithms to solve this. So again, it's easy to solve this new variance. But it's also interpretable. In what way? You can benchmark probabilities, and then this biased probabilities can give you a good idea of what would happen in the system if you were to act in some ways. For example, and just to finalize, equitable assignment. What is equitable assignment? You're going to say is uniform. Everybody has the same probability of assigning to different HPs. Why would I do that? Why would you assign, as a policy, HPs randomly to patients?
My question is if for some randomly, we cannot match patients between the kind of personality the HP has.
You cannot match with the personality, but that's already hard to assess, right? But why would you do that randomly? It is something is growing as a trend. Sometimes the things are a bit random. What is the benefit of doing things randomly?
You can verify the risk or the rewards later on based on this random
all of them, the difficulty of evaluation is the same. If you give me the probabilities, all of them have the difficulty.
Everyone does the same hours?
So that's going to be what people think. That's the reasoning, which is correct. But when you calculate it, it's not. It's because of fairness. You're being fair. You're not discriminating where you should go with this patient. Of course, this is a very bad solution. Why? Are people going to actually have the same hours? Sorry for running late. Yeah. Is that going to have a very bad? Is that going to be a good solution when you think about the TSPs? No. So it's not actually fair. It's unfair because some people are going to start traveling very, very far. So that's something that we had to talk to them. Hey, this equitable assignment is actually not that fair, right? But people can think, in the service is going to be fair, but not the travels, not the travel time, because people are going to start traveling all around the city. The other then is, okay, if this is a problem, we can also do a kind of cluster assignment, which you cluster patients that are close by and assign to the HPs that are closer, right? This is a little bit better. So the probability of you being assigned to someone depends on the distance. The larger the distance, the lower the probability. But we can also use machine learning. I can look at the patient features. Oh, this patient is not a particular property, maybe personality. And I can say, look, with high probability, what is the likelihood that this patient is going to be very far, is going to enjoy is going to appreciate the HP's personality. You can learn these probabilities by looking at the data, looking at previous assignments, looking at the ones that work or not, and calculate the distance. So then you can estimate probabilities using some data, and you use this kind of Bayes logistic regression to estimate that. So, in other words, just using this as an estimate, even though it's not a great estimate, you're not going to do this every day randomly, they would never accept it, it still gives you good solutions when you incorporate to the general framework. So, I'm happy to share the slides. Also, we do something more complicated. But in the end, we also have some nice theory. We did test this for, it's an agency, it's in Hamilton, and we did test for different patients and different types of health requirements. So sometimes personal support work, nurses like lung treatments, interostomal incontinence. They have some specific type of requirements here. This is how often they come into the different regions of the city. And just to give you a quick glance, is that this is some kind of this is the time that it takes you to travel from different cities and how much more you can get in terms of reward, right? And just by looking in the future, you get like 10-15% more. Is that, oh, that's small. That's not small. This is every day, right? So it's just by looking to that, this very rough probability of perspective of the future, incorporated it, you get very good statistics. They travel much less, and then you also can accept more patients. But that's the idea, okay? Dealing with uncertainty and this idea of these models and change these models accordingly. Okay? So thank you. I'm sorry that I went overboard a little bit. Yeah, if I have the paper, if you haven't had the paper, read it.
Thank you. I have a question actually. So, have you thought like how